Intracranial pressure monitors. This is something I learned on this case. A lot of times neurosurgeons will say, well, we put a spike in the skull to measure the pressures. The reason they do that, when there's been a bad brain injury, they check pressures because the brain is encapsulated in the skull and it can swell and it has nowhere to go. It'll push against the skull, and that's how people die. Natasha Richardson, you remember, the actress, that's what happened to her. She had a bleed in the brain. It was not diagnosed, and it can happen very fast. The brain filled up with blood, and she died before they could do anything. So they put an intracranial pressure monitor in, and again, the neurosurgeons will just refer to that as, oh, we put a spike in the skull, as if it's nothing. But you can see it really is more than just nothing. They actually have to drill a hole in your skull, and then they thread a catheter down through the brain into the ventricles, which is deep into the brain. So if you kind of think about that going in your brain, it kind of gives you the creeps and gives you a sense that this is not just a simple procedure. And if you read about this, there's a lot of infections related to this. There's all kinds of untoward results that can happen because of this. Any good brain injury case, almost without exception, you need good lay witnesses. And these are witnesses that can discuss the person before and after. One of the reasons you need them is because neuropsychology is still considered a very useful tool to measure functioning after a brain injury. But the problem with neuropsychology is it's a series of a lot of tests. Those of you I know, there's a lot of people familiar with it. And those tests, many of those tests, a person with a severe brain injury can do well on. Many of those tests, a person with a serious and moderate brain injury can do very well on. So those tests really don't measure necessarily reality in the real world. And this is a little bit an aside, but if you think about those tests, if you know how they're given in a quiet room, free of distraction, one-on-one with the person providing the test. The tests are designed to give optimum performance. The tests are really not designed to measure how someone will do in the real world. And so don't be misled or don't give too much credibility to neuropsychological testing, particularly because of what I'm going to show you that's coming down the road with neuroimaging, which is actually looking at the brain and looking at the structure of the brain. Getting back to before and after witnesses, though, they're critical, and we had great before and after witnesses in this case. People that knew the client before and could say that Gary was just a different person. Very critical witnesses, because many times in these cases, particularly if you go to trial, the defense will have a neuropsychologist to minimize the injury. And neuropsychological testimony is complicated, it's confusing. Juries often don't understand it. So in my experience, the neuropsychologists will cancel each other out, and then the lay witnesses can carry the day.